You're listening to the Doc Lounge podcast. This is a place for candid conversations with healthcare industry's top physicians, executives, and thought leaders. This podcast is made possible by Pacific Companies, your trusted advisor in physician recruitment. I am your host, Summer Gilbert, and I am the Director of Marketing and Branding here at Pacific Companies. And my co-hostess with the mostest today is our EVP of Training. You know him well, the one and only Chris Kahl. Thank you for joining me today, Mr. Chris.
Oh, thank you for having me, Summer.
Well, Chris, I'm really excited because today we got to talk with Dr. Wael Saasouh. And what an inspiring guy with such a good attitude. He's had such a interesting journey, to say the least. He was born in Lebanon, came to the U.S., tells us about his struggles, navigates the journey for us, coming to the U.S., how important the support of his family and his wife was, kind of dives into that J1 visa process. So anyone listening that wants to learn more about that, well, here's your chance, firsthand from someone that has recently done this. So love his attitude and love his take on being a physician and working hard and, living your dream and your passion. So this is a amazing episode. So stay tuned to learn more about Dr. Wael Saasouh's journey. And just a quick reminder, this podcast is intended to be an open forum. Any personal beliefs, views, or opinions represented in this episode are that of our guest and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Pacific Companies. So please have an open mind and remember that this podcast is not a news source, but rather a safe and neutral platform for candid conversations. Well, today on the podcast, we have Dr. Wael Saasouh, anesthesiologist, born in Lebanon and now practicing here in the U.S. Dr. Saasouh, what made you want to go into medicine?
Thank you for having me for summer. Well, to go into medicine, it was a very multifaceted decision. I was doing a chemistry major back in Lebanon at the American University of Beirut. And at the time, I was just looking at my options and trying to see what resonates more with me. And out of the options that I had, because I didn't have that many options for graduate studies in chemistry, I decided to do something that was more, with better reach, with better flexibility, and medicine was just one of the suggestions my advisor gave me, and for some reason it just stuck, and that was when I made the very long-term commitment to actually go into medicine.
Gotcha. When did you decide what specialty you wanted to be in, and why did you choose it?
So towards the end of my medical school years, again, I was trying to look at what kind of options I had for specialty. And I was drawn to only a couple of all the specialties, and one of them was ENT, or ear, nose, and throat surgery, and the other one was anesthesia. I ended up picking anesthesia, but then at the time, I was thinking about how they're both kind of similar because they both incorporate clinical work, intervention, clinical medicine, as well as, hands-on work. And that's mostly what drew me to both of them. But then I ended up choosing anesthesia because I felt more relaxed and at ease when I was doing my rotation there. And something about the everyday life of an anesthesiologist where you feel like you can fill in multiple roles within the same day. You act as an internist, you act as a cardiologist, you act as a pulmonary physician, you act as somebody, as a surgeon sometimes when you're doing procedures. And I felt like it was very versatile, and I liked that at the time, so that's what I went for.
Dr. Saasouh, I noticed on your CV that you did an anesthesia residency in Beirut, and then you came to the States and redid the residency. Could you provide some insight to our listeners as to the differences and why you did two residencies?
Well, the reason I came to the U.S. was that I wanted to do some more academic work. So I wanted to be practicing in a place where I could do some research, I could be keeping up with advances in the field, and I had some opportunities back in Lebanon, but then they were kind of limited. And at the time when I finished my residency, I had started working there, and I worked there for 2 years. But it wasn't as fulfilling as I was hoping it would be, and I figured that I'm still young enough to actually try and go and explore other options.
Mm-hmm.
So the U.S. was naturally one of the top options I had. The problem is, even if you finish residency and you practice in another country, you can't really just come over here and start practicing. For the most part, except for a few exceptions, you will need to do the residency again to get board certified and to get licensed to work in the U.S. So that's where I am right now. Actually, I'm finishing up residency for the second time in anesthesia, and in hopes of just working as a staff.
Now, since you completed that residency, did that make you a more attractive candidate to the programs here that you're applying to, since you already had experience in anesthesia in another country?
Surprisingly enough, for the most part, no, because the way the application process works is you submit an application and they ask you for a few important dates, one of which is, when did you graduate medical school? For me, I graduated medical school a while ago. So that was 2008.
Mm-hmm.
From 2008 to 2012, I was an anesthesia resident, and then 12 to 14, I was working there as a staff. But on my application, it says 2008 was my year of graduation. So at first glance, it looks like I've been out of medical school for however many years. And programs don't really like that. They like fresh graduates because they're still young. They still have the knowledge fresh in their minds before they start with specialty. And any gap years in the middle are, I don't want to say frowned upon, but they're just not the norm. And unless somebody takes care to look into your CV and see what you were doing in those years, this kind of works against you. And most of the programs will be getting a lot more applicants than they have positions. So that first filtration part will be automatic. So some programs will actually set limits. We don't want medicine graduates that graduated, say, more than 3 years ago, regardless, losing some potential applicants to that.
So would you advise future applicants to residency programs in the U.S. to forego training in their home country and just apply here in the U.S. for just the one residency?
That's a very personal decision, but I would say to someone who knows they will end up practicing in the U.S. and who knows that that's their ultimate goal, then yes, finish medical school, start applying from your home country, and go for it. In my case, that wasn't the plan all along. I started working at home, and then I decided that I wanted something different. So I had to go through the motions of applying again and doing a second residency.
Yeah. As an established physician now, what advice would you give someone who's getting ready to choose a specialty?
Choosing a specialty should never be about how much money you think you're going to make, or what kind of daily schedule you think you're going to have, or how many vacation days, or, all that thing. Choosing a specialty has to resonate with you as a person. This is something you're going to end up doing every day of your life until you retire. And if you're not comfortable with it, if you don't actually like it, not just tolerate it, you have to like it to be successful at it and to be happy with it. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much money you're making. If you're not happy with how you're making it, you don't get the joy of the experience.
Yeah.
And you're always going to be learning. You're always going to be studying new things. Advances in any field are going to come in while you're training and while you're working. So you will never feel like you're done with the training, and unless you just go do some private practice somewhere that doesn't emphasize keeping up with the advances, and that's pretty much nowhere.
Yeah.
So if somebody's planning on picking a specialty, they really have to, my advice at least, I would say, go see how the residents are living, go see how the attendings are living, see what kind of cases they do, how is their normal everyday life? How's their family life? How's everything? So see if that can work into your life and see if you can incorporate that into your daily routine.
What do you like least and most about anesthesiology?
Least is waking up so early in the morning. I am not much of a morning person, but you have to be there in the morning. You have to be there before the surgeons are there. Well, the surgeons are there doing something else, but you're in the operating room first.
Mm-hmm.
And for someone who's not a morning person, that's not the most exciting part of the day. But again, you will not find a specialty that's all pros. Everything has pros and cons. As a specialty, anesthesia is a lot more forgiving in terms of call schedules and vacations and all that. Everybody will be working on some holiday or some weekend or some weekday at night. That will happen. But for the most part, once you're a staff member, typically there's only one person who's on call at night. So everybody has to go home, leave their work behind, come back the next day fresh. And that's great about anesthesia in terms of convenience. Another really good thing is something we already talked about, and it's how versatile you feel as a physician, where you can be someone who's treating a heart condition 1 minute and then a lung condition the other minute, then putting in invasive lines or using sophisticated monitors or doing any of that. Monitoring the brain, monitoring circulation, all of that comes within your job description as an anesthesiologist. And we cover operating room, intensive care unit, pediatrics, adults. It makes you feel like you are a valuable addition to the institution because you can help in so many places. When they call for a code, there's always an anesthesiologist or somebody from anesthesia. When somebody has trouble putting an IV in, somebody from anesthesia can help. You feel like you can be helpful in more than one scenario. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say anything bad about other specialties. It's just that one of the things that drew me personally to the specialty.
Right. I'd like to switch gears a little bit, and having moved here from Lebanon, several years back, that maybe you could discuss the challenges you faced moving here, financially, emotionally, personally, a lot of those things that, our foreign docs are coming to a new country and all those things that you have faced.
Well, Lebanon is almost half a globe away from the U.S. So it's a big move. It's not, sometimes you move from one city to the other within the same state and you feel like that was a big decision. Think about moving everything from one country to the other, and the country that's rather far. So it's as a volume, it's a big volume decision. It's something you have to really consider, and it's never just you. If you're married, you have or you have a spouse or a significant other, that affects them as well. Your own side of the family, your parents, your siblings. If you have kids, that's going to affect them. Your spouses or significant others' family also affects them because you will be far. It won't be practical anymore. You won't be able to visit people whenever you want to. In my case, my entire side of the family is back in Lebanon, and they're still there now. So my only contact with them is just a phone call once or twice a week, or say a video call or something like that. Mm-hmm. And anybody coming in from a foreign country will have to deal with one form or another of a visa, and that gets complicated because sometimes you feel like it may not be easy to renew your visa if you leave the country. So sometimes you have to be stuck here for a while, which happened to me actually. Mm-hmm. So I've been here for 5 years now. I haven't visited my home country in 5 years. And and it's just for the fear of something going wrong that I have no control over. And if I were to go and get stuck for, say, 3 weeks or 4 weeks or a couple months, my residency and everything I've worked for is going to be jeopardized. So you have to look at pros and cons for that. At the same time, things are happening. Life events are happening back home. You have weddings, you have deaths, you have births, you have everything going on in the family and you're not there. So also think about that. Everybody who immigrates will say, oh, I'm just going to go for a couple of years and come back. Don't take it for granted because you never know how that works out. Eventually things work out, but there's always a cost for all of this. And also on the other side of this, why are you moving to a different country, regardless what country it is? If you're moving to better yourself, to improve your education, your footprint in this world, then it may be worth it for you. So if you think it is, go ahead and do it.
How did your family feel about you making the decision to leave your country and come over here?
Well, they weren't happy about the decision because they knew we were going to be separated for an indefinite amount of time. They didn't know when I was going back. And they certainly expected me to go back sooner than now. But they knew why I was doing it, and they were very supportive. I'm lucky to come from a family that supports education on all levels. And they knew that this was, for me personally, this is a better choice than staying back home. And they supported it wholeheartedly. So that was brain talk, but then emotional talk was, oh, you're going to go, we're not going to see you for a while, So they had some mixed feelings about it, but they did support it.
What about financially? I'm sure you're doing fairly well over there as a practicing physician when you came to the States. Walk us through some of the challenges you faced in your financial pocketbook.
Financially this was probably next to not seeing my family for 5 years. This was one of the biggest struggles I've had coming here. I got married before I came here a couple of years before. That was when I started working. And when you're newlyweds, you start working, most of your income is going to go towards either paying back loans or starting a house, starting a family, and all that. So by the time we made the decision to come here, we were almost back to square one financially. And that was a big hit to us because starting here from square one is not easy. You have no credit history. You have no bank accounts. You have no proof of previous payments. You have nothing that financial institutions can go off of. So you start with very limited income, whatever income you're getting from your residency, if you matched, or anything else that you're coming in for. I remember my first bank account accepted a credit card application from me, and it was one of those secure cards where you have to put in the money before you can get the credit card. And my credit limit was $500.
You're a doctor.
Yeah. And so that was my means at the time. So this is the maximum I could use on a credit card for a pretty decent amount of time. That plus the fact that I came in, so I came in and I did 2 fellowships before I matched into residency. And fellowship and residency salaries are they're not something you can live comfortably out of, especially if you're a family. So eventually, you start accumulating credit card debt, and you can't get personal loans because you're not a citizen. So personal loans are almost impossible to get if you're not a citizen. Can't really get big mortgages, or you can't. So I ended up renting. I've been renting since I came here anyway. With time, with very meticulous financial planning, I managed to keep my payments up to date. So my credit balance kept improving. My credit limits kept improving. But with improving credit limits, you accumulate more credit card debt. And the equivalent of this for U.S. graduates is their medical student loans. Nobody graduates from residency without at least a couple $100,000 in medical student loans, which is a different story because that can be repaid in different ways. In my case, it's pure credit card debt, which if your medical student loans are in the, say, anywhere between 5 to 15% interest, credit cards start at 20 or so. So the interest I was paying on my credit cards up until last month was staggering, was a huge amount. So you live in this continuous fear of this financial impact that you're trying to absorb, and you're not an attending it. Once you're an attending, you say, "Well, things are going to be fine. I'm going to pay it back."
Right.
But until then, it gets really rough. So throughout those years, about a year and a half ago, I managed to find the one institution I could find that provided loans to foreign graduates. And I can leave some information about that in the show notes. So I used them to get personal loans so I could pay back my credit cards and try to lower my interest bracket. And it helped for a little bit, but again, you're limited on how much you can get. And about a month or two ago, I found the only other institution I know of that also supports foreign graduates, and this one's specifically for doctors. And it's formed by doctors, and they just launched, I think, last month. And I got in touch with them, and I actually managed to get enough of a loan to pay back all my credit cards. And now I have one payment towards that loan, which is about half the interest rate that I used to pay for my credit cards, which is a big deal.
Wow.
And that also I can leave some information about.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So now what I'm doing is I'm trying to sustain myself until I finish residency. And then once I start working as an attending, as a staff member, then the actual salary that I've been waiting for the past, I don't know how many years, will come in. And then I will start paying back my loans. And then I can start thinking of, upgrading my lifestyle. But my advice to people trying to come in is, as soon as you get that higher bracket income, slow down. Don't overthink it. Don't start just buying things left and right, because think about all you've been through to get there and try to get there responsibly. In my case, what I'm planning to do is make sure I zero out all my loans, any credit card debt that I have, and then gradually upgrade my lifestyle. And there are a lot of podcasts and blogs about this, about responsible spending when your income changes dramatically within a month. And I think it's something people should think about.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of the physicians that we've had on the podcast so far have expressed, the importance of living off residency salary after you're done with school to really get yourself caught up with debt. But I really didn't realize how hard it was for foreign graduates to come here and get loans. So I will link all this information that you shared with us, and so that anyone listening would benefit from it can, find that information easily. So thank you for sharing that. But circling back a little bit, how did your wife feel about coming to the U.S., and what is she doing right now for work?
Here's the other story.
Okay.
So my wife, when I was training in medical school, my wife was training in nursing school. And by the time I finished and we got married, she had her nursing degree and a master's degree, and she was working in a critical care unit back at home. While I was staff, she moved from her hospital to mine, and she was the director of nursing in that hospital. It was a community hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And when we started considering coming here, we looked at the general demand for nurses, and it was, as it is today, there was a lot of demand. So we figured it should be easy for her to get a job as soon as we move in, and that should offset whatever expenses I would have in terms of applying for residency, which is a whole budget by itself.
Mm-hmm.
So we move in, and she couldn't get a job. Even though she already passed her exams, she got her license to work in 3 different states. for some reason, it was very difficult for hospitals to offer her a job because she was a foreign graduate, although she graduated from an American university. The reasoning they gave us was that for her to get a job, she needs to apply for her own visa, basically an H-1 visa, which is what some residents go for. So it's essentially the same process, but the institutions we were asking were maybe not used to the process, or maybe they didn't have a proper mechanism to deal with it. So she ended up applying for a large amount of jobs and getting denied every time just because somebody didn't want to deal with the process, which wouldn't have taken that much, but it just wouldn't work. And those were some big name hospitals. It wasn't the small community hospitals here.
Yeah, how frustrating.
To say the least. So after that, basically we decided that let's forget about this for a little bit because, applying for jobs and not getting them is frustrating in itself, forgetting about the missed income. So just to save our sanity a little bit, we decided not to apply anymore. And I'm almost done with residency. And once I start working, my visa status should be changed. And by then I'll get a work permit. She gets a work permit, and things should be good.
What visa status are you on, and walk through our listeners what you need to go through to secure a position?
Okay. Residents or residency applicants typically get one of two visas, either a J1 or an H1. And that depends on a lot of things, including the willingness of the program to sponsor one or the other. If you're on a J visa, it has some stipulations where you have to either go back to your home country for a number of years or get a faculty position in an underserved area in the U.S. for a number of years. If you do an H-1 visa, you don't have that stipulation, but an H-1 visa is typically more expensive to get. Either way, you have to go through your residency program to get it. When I first came in, I came through the Cleveland Clinic. I had a 2-year research fellowship there, and then I did a year of neuroanesthesia fellowship. So through the Cleveland Clinic, I had the H-1 visa. Once I finished from there and I matched in Michigan, my program did not support the H-1 visas anymore, so I had to downgrade to a J-1. And because of the whole visa issue and the travel limitations and all that, I wanted to see if I had any other options besides the J1. And I found out another option to, instead of downgrading to the J1, I could get an O1 visa. And this visa is granted to people who have some extra input into the field. So, for example, I had my 2 years of research at the Cleveland Clinic, and during those years, I managed to first author a couple of publications in big journals. I had a couple of news articles about me. When you contribute to the field in a way that makes you kind of stand out, you become eligible for a visa like that. And so I chose to go for it. And my program helped me find an attorney who's done this before for the program. So I got in touch with her and we applied, and it's a bit of a rigorous process, but luckily enough I managed to get it. So I've been on an O visa since I started residency. The good thing about it is that you avoid going to a J1 with all the stipulations. The bad thing is programs don't sponsor these visas, so you have to pay for it. Meaning you have to pay for the visa itself and for the attorney. And this could run you several $1,000s. And for one reason or another, I had to renew it every year. So I was paying several $1,000s per year just for my visa.
Wow.
Which added another complexity to the scenario.
Right.
But it is an option. So if you have the means and you have the qualifications for it, I would go for that instead of going to a J. And programs, in theory, shouldn't have a problem with it because it doesn't affect your application as a resident.
Mm-hmm.
But some programs will not be able to sponsor your H1 simply because they don't do it.
Now, will that affect your ability to secure a position after the completion of your training?
No. So the O1 is very similar to an H1. It's just it has different qualifications to it, and you can go from an O to a green card based on your employment.
Okay. And for our listeners out there, could you explain the EAD and how that works into the process?
I believe it's. I'm not certain about the details, but I believe it's very similar to the H1, if I'm not mistaken. So your status as a visa holder is very similar to an H1,
Mm-hmm.
and your upgrade from that to a green card should be similar as well. Unless when you're upgrading to green card, you're upgrading as part of employment or a national interest waiver, or the processes will differ, and I'm not very experienced with those. But that would be a good time to get a lawyer.
Yeah, good advice. Reflecting back, you've told us about, a lot about your journey so far. Was it worth it coming to the U.S.? And would you make the same decision if you had to go back in time?
It's been many years, but I think I still have to wait because I'm not done yet. Would I do it again? I kind of did it again, and because within medicine, this to me, I'm convinced that this is the best option for me. So if I had to go back all the way to medical school, I probably would not, because of all the hardship. You'd rather do something that's a little bit quicker, that helps you enjoy your younger years. Because if I think about when I started college at 17, and now I'm 35, and I'm still kind of in my learning student chair, and I'm not out of it yet, even though I had that 2-year break in the middle where I was staff. But during those 2 years, I was studying for my USMLEs, and so I was always the student or the trainee, and I still am. And that's a long-term commitment that is definitely worth it at the end. But if you see it that way when you're starting, and if you know you're going to go through certain hardships, and this applies to some people, maybe not everyone, I may or may not choose to do this whole thing again. Because at the time before going into medical school and during my college years, I was a major in chemistry, and I had a lot of interest in chemistry and in computers. So I did a minor in computer science. I had a lot of branching interests that I had to forego just for the sake of medicine. So you drop something, you pick something up. But if I were to go back to my college years, I don't know, maybe not, but I can't say for sure. But within medicine, definitely, I'm happy with my choice of specialty.
Well, hearing your story, what dedication that you have put into your career so far, and I guarantee once you are done with all of this process and established and working, you're going to have a different appreciation for being a physician than many others would.
I believe you. It's I've had a glimpse of it back home, but here is definitely on a different level.
Yeah, that's really inspiring to hear. I'm 35 too, and if we look at both of our lives and where we've been, we're a world away in experiences and what we're going through. But it looks like, from where you've been, it's all about your mindset and just how your outlook on the entire situation.
You will have a lot of setbacks on the way, whether it's financial, whether it's personal relationships, families. If you're not if you're doing this alone, it will not be good.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing this with someone who deeply cares about you and about your goals and whose mindset is aligned with yours, that can be a very big source of support. Without my wife being so understanding, I would not be here. I wouldn't be able to do all of this. It's a lot of delayed gratification. I always use that word, and I mean it every time. It's, you know where you're headed. It takes so long that sometimes you lose track of your target, but you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing this, you're doing it for a reason, and you have your reasons why you were drawn to this whole career line in the first place. For me, I just wanted something that I felt comfortable doing, that I felt useful doing, and that would provide me with a proper lifestyle for me and my family in the future. And I still believe that this will get me there. It's just that it takes a lot longer than the average other career line.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Hearing you talk, I've kind of been inspired because you talk a lot about your wife. And a really interesting episode would be to have a significant other's opinion and experience of, being married to a physician. And maybe one in training, established physician, one like you, coming from another country. So, thank you so much. I mean, it sounds like she's a big support and a big part of your life and a part of your success. And I would love to have your, wife on and, just hear her side of the story and her side of the journey. Well, we can't thank you enough for spending time with us today on the Doc Lounge podcast, and we would love to have you back on for round 2 in the future, and possibly even having your wife on. Any final words before we say goodbye?
Anybody who chooses medicine, no matter what specialty they go for, they will be doing a lot, and they will be sacrificing a lot, and they will have a lot of nights away from home, a lot of sleepless nights, whether they're studying for something or they're on overnight call or they're doing a specifically difficult case. It is rewarding in itself to the person and to their immediate surroundings. So they should never feel that these efforts are going for nothing. And even though there's suffering involved, and I'm not using the word lightly, there is suffering involved. But at the end of the day, you feel like you're doing something that's worth that suffering, and you feel like if you help one person every day with something, if you make a difference in somebody's health, that's already gratifying enough. And your family members will be going through this whole thing with you, so it's not just you. Always look at who's with you, who's taking this burden with you, and be grateful towards them. Because it's not easy to be around us as trainees. I can tell that it's difficult. So kudos to everyone.
Well, amen to that. What great final words to go out with. So thank you so much again for your time. We appreciate you. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
No problem. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you to all our listeners. If you'd like to be notified when new episodes air, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you to Pacific Companies. Without you guys, this podcast would not be possible. If you'd like to be a guest or for more information, go to www.pacificcompanies.com.